es el taller del ABC de cómo hacer los cursos masivos abiertos en línea. Es para nosotros un gusto tener este taller en el marco del 50 aniversario de nuestra universidad. Este taller, al igual que el anterior con el profesor Dani Levy, ha sido patrocinado gracias al apoyo de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, la representación en nuestro país. Estamos con mucho gusto llevando adelante estos talleres y sobre todo con su participación. Hemos tenido muchísimos requerimientos y lastimosamente no hemos podido dar cabida a todos, ya que es un taller práctico. Por lo tanto, una otra recomendación es que el taller se va a llevar adelante en inglés. Las personas que tengan alguna dificultad en el idioma, por favor, tenemos transmisión simultánea, que les pediríamos que recojan la puerta de afuera el aparato para su transmisión. Cabe señalar que este taller también se está transmitiendo de manera simultánea con los campus de la Universidad Católica en Ica, en Santa Cruz y en Cochabamba, a quienes damos también una calurosa bienvenida a la distancia. Para empezar quisiera, por favor, invitar a Mary, que es la consejera de Prensa, Cultura y Educación de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos. Mary, por favor, bienvenida.
Buenas tardes a todos. Pues al empezar quiero saludar y dar las gracias a la profesora Verónica Querejazu y al profesor David Zabaleta, nuestros socios en este taller. Para nosotros la educación es un tema fundamental y por eso la embajada está muy complacida en apoyar a la Escuela de Productividad y Competitividad de la Universidad Católica Boliviana, que pues está empeñada en el nivel de excelencia académica. Con seguridad que los docentes y los estudiantes se beneficiarán grandemente de las nuevas y más eficaces herramientas de aprendizaje online. También nos sentimos muy honrados de contar con la presencia de VALVA, una de las voces más autorizadas en la enseñanza virtual en los Estados Unidos y una experta de clase mundial en el diseño de cursos abiertos en línea, MOOCs. Nos complace mucho además que representantes de otras universidades estén participando en este taller. Sin duda, esta oportunidad será muy útil para explorar las oportunidades que brindan las nuevas tecnologías para lograr una educación cada vez más integral y excelente. Ahora bien, las nuevas herramientas plantean nuevos retos para los docentes. Tienen que mantener el ritmo de la evolución de las tecnologías educativas y estar siempre un paso adelante o tal vez solamente un paso atrasado de estudiantes en el conocimiento y el uso de los nuevos recursos del Internet. Por todo esto, les deseo éxito y que disfruten de este taller que nos llevaría a todos a un nivel educativo más alto para el beneficio de los estudiantes y de toda la sociedad. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Mary. Sin más preámbulo, quiero presentar a Annie VALVA, a quien le damos una cordial bienvenida a nuestro país. Welcome, Annie. It's a great pleasure to have you here. La señora VALVA es directora asociada en el área de desarrollo educacional de Harvard-X. Está aquí gracias al convenio que tiene la Universidad Católica, en particular Maestrías para el Desarrollo, con la Escuela de Gobierno de la Universidad de Harvard. La señora VALVA obtuvo su maestría en Tecnologías para la Educación en la Universidad de Harvard y ha trabajado durante varios años en el desarrollo de contenidos multimedia para la enseñanza. Durante los últimos 18 años, así como señalaba Mary, es una profesional de clase mundial, ya que ha participado en la concepción, desarrollo, administración y promoción de productos interactivos para instituciones educativas y comerciales en los Estados Unidos y el Reino Unido. Entre los más importantes, y para no cansarlos, se puede destacar que ha sido vicepresidenta de Integración de Contenido y Tecnologías en Pearson, ha sido directora de tecnología de WGBH, que es un sistema de difusión pública, y asesora para Apple y Tandem. Annie, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Gracias, Fernando.
Hola, me llamo Annie. It's a pleasure to be here. Con permiso, hablo mucho español, pero no comprendo nada. No es un broma, no es una broma. So, pues, no sé. So, how many of you went to see Dan Levy, Professor Dan Levy last week? So I work very closely with Dan Levy. He's muy amable, very wonderful. And how many of you have taken an online course? Ah. Anybody have taken a MOOC? Any Harvard X MOOCs? Ah. And I know we have at least one person, Pablo, you've made a MOOC. Anybody else have created a MOOC? Okay. La semana próxima, we make more MOOCs. So, Fernando, muchas gracias para todo, para la invitación a Bolivia. I have a warning for you. My visa lasts for 10 years, so cuidado. Thank you. Veronica and Gonzalo came to visit us at Harvard X last December, and we had a wonderful time, didn't we? Yes. They followed me around to different meetings and science fairs. It was very fun. So let me ask you a few things. When you think of online learning, what kinds of things do you think of? ¿Tiene miedo? Are you excited? ¿Cuál palabras cuando piensas online learning? On.
Good things, some bad things.
Pros and cons, sí.
Leer mucho.
Learn-
Read a lot.
Oh, read a lot, muchas. Tenemos muchos videos. So good, bad.
Time.
¿Cómo?
Time.
Takes a lot of time.
No. Less time.
Less time.
Normal class.
¿Cómo?
Flexible.
Flexible schedule.
Challenge.
Challenging. ¿Por qué challenging?
Because every time when you try to decide to use some course, it's a challenge for you in order to finish the course.
Es correcta. A veces we have maybe 5,000. Some of our courses have 50,000. We have a new course on religious literacy that we'll talk a little bit about today. So maybe 50,000 people, which is not normal for us. Usually it's between 5 and 10,000. But if 5 to 10,000 or 50,000, the completion is around 3 to 5%. But that percentage is more students than professors ever have in their classroom. So it's still a very big number. And to complete some of our MOOCs, we have one MOOC that is 15 months long. It's the history of China. It's called China X. Two more.
Interaction.
Interaction.
Can it be like international interaction?
Yes. global. Anybody have fears in the miedo? Great. Sientas. So today I would like to go through our production process, but first I would like to tell you a little bit about how and what it means to the university at Harvard University. So I'll start a little bit with giving you a little background, but before I do, I want to get a better feel for what disciplines. Anybody here from EDUCACION?
I teach English.
Teach English? Okay.
I am you.
Oh, hi Yolanda.
Hi.
Educación de Ciencias. Okay, so we're going to have a test on the sciences.
No.
How about negocios y economía? Ah, muchos. Okay, very good.
But if you are full-time, professor, could we consider education?
See, it's a good question. Is teaching full-time education? Of course, but one of the things we'll talk about today are the questions. I did my graduate work at the Graduate School of Harvard Education Graduate School. So we learned things like words like learning objectives and measuring outcomes. And one of the first things when I first came to Harvard X, I went over, it happened to be a business school professor at the Harvard Business School, but it turns out it happened in most places, the professors, unless they're from the School of Education, if I say, one professor, very well known, very serious, very intelligent, I said, Professor, what are your learning objectives? And he thought about it. He said, well, Annie, I want people to learn. And I thought I was asking the wrong question. If I started asking, okay, I wake you up in the middle of the night, you're sound asleep, and I say, what is the best part of your course? They always have an answer. And then, what are traditionally difficult concepts? They always have an answer. So one of the things, I'll be giving some tips, some consejos. And one of my first consejos today is, I learned very early at Harvard X to ask questions in the language that people could understand. The people I work with, in 3 years, I've worked with over 120 professors. Anytime you come to Harvard X, and I invite you all, ask Veronica, it's fun, right, Veronica? If you're in Boston, please come by. And I learned early on that we have to not think about what we think. We have to think about what the learner thinks. Now, that seems obvious, of course, but when they're far away, you may never meet them. When you are talking to people through the computer, you don't really have that, what we have here. We have facial recognition. Maybe they get excited on a certain point, but all of that goes away when you're online. So the best part about doing online is always thinking about putting the learner at the center of your design. That's true of any type of web design, because remember, they're literally one click away from WhatsApp, Facebook, from Google. So you always want to think about not what you want to teach, but what you want them to learn. So that's my tip number one. Let me start with a little bit of an overview. Okay, so this is first and foremost what we want to do at Harvard X. People come from all over the world to be faculty at Harvard, and they are some of the best and the brightest in their field, but most of them will tell you they have never heard about how they teach and how students learn. Because people tend to teach as they were taught. So professors that come to us, and we always have at least 40 courses in development, and that is our promise to the people that fund us, the president. So what we want to do, faculty come to us and spend at least 9 months, not full time, but 9 months we fit to their schedule, And at the end of 9 months, the best thing, it doesn't always happen, the best thing they can say to me is, Annie, I'm going to really think about how I'm going to teach my class this time. They'll take content made and put it into their classroom. There'll be a flipped class, a blended class. They'll try Santi's imagination free. And there's one more. So everything you just saw there, everything that I helped to manage, created all of this content in the last 3 years. And we think to ourselves, what can the medium of digital online do that you can't easily do in your classroom? It's very difficult to make a claymation. It's very difficult to pause in the middle of the classroom and have each person want to repeat this and repeat that. So we think about how do we use the media and the digital medium to try things that is not very easy to do in your real life. Most of the faculty, there are 2 exceptions, but most of the faculty we work with have never even had a camera. And so we have a talent coach. And one of the things I like to say up front, yes, Harvard, we have 60 people. It's very resourced, and we know we are very lucky. But most of the people that I talk to, they may have a couple of people, they may have 4 people. So as I talk today, think about all the ways you can do some of these things in your own environment. You have a theater department, or maybe you have a theater. In fact, David showed me a theater group where they give plays. Now, what if you wanted to have a talent coach to help faculty do better on camera, look right to camera, and have some tips and coaching on how they can present better? Think about they're learning this, how to do this to camera, but we like to think that then that transfers over to the classroom. Video, for example, we try to make our video up to 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. When we get to 10 minutes, people don't finish the video. About 50% of people tell us that they're taking our courses on a mobile, and we'll talk to you a little bit later about where people are coming from. So just to give you an idea, I understand that there are people in the room that are trying to create an online learning division. And Harvard X is part of what we call One Harvard. It's through the vision of our president, President Faust. And I'm sure you can all imagine in big universities, you have your business school, they're across the river. You have your education school, and they don't have as many resources. And then you have the sciences, and then you have the medical. They're literally 4 miles away. So everybody has their silos. And people started the schools creating their own online groups. What a waste of money. So what we try to do is we work with every school in Harvard University, except we still have not worked with the School of Dentistry, but we would like to. So the advantage of being part of One Harvard is that as our world changes into a cross-disciplinary approach, when Google goes out to hire people, sometimes they don't even care that you have a college degree. They care about how you think. They care about how analytical you can be. They care about how resourceful you are. So why not teach more courses with multiple disciplines, joining multiple perspectives in one course? So we like to think of ourselves as campus conveners. We work a lot. We have quite a few courses, 3 schools for one course. We're cross-campus, and we make the curricular connections. So an example is we have about 11 courses now in global health. People like to take global health maybe from an anthropological point of view, from a medical point of view, from a humanitarian point of view. So in my job, I can see all of our courses at once. So if we have people over in this school wanting to do architecture, and over in this school wanting to do mathematics, what if we bring them together to make one course? Or what if we create clusters of courses so you go to a topic like global health and you can look at it through different lenses? So it's a lot easier when you're a central organization and working across all schools. There are 3 major goals, and the reason, again, I don't mean to just be talking about Harvard and Harvard X. I think this is a very good model that people around the universities that come to visit are starting to use similar models. So we have reach. So we want to expand access to education worldwide. We're at about just under 4 million students, learners coming to our courses of all ages. So right now we have about 120 course offerings. The other thing is we do up to 3 versions of every course if the faculty wants to do that. So you can try it out. We do research on them, and then we write a course report, and what you learn in version 1, we do version 2. We had one course where the majority of learners were not passing the tests. And when we really looked into it, a course on Einstein, but it was a historical course about looking at 3 Einstein theories and what they mean to the modern world. So if you look at E equals mc squared, for example, what effect on today's nuclear warfare? What happened was we wrote about 110 assessment questions. And the questions after version 1 had to be completely rewritten because we didn't anticipate that people didn't have skills. So we rewrote the assessments, and now we're looking at other types of technologies that allow certain learners to get up to speed, and other learners that maybe already have that would be able to take the higher level assessment questions. We have 2,432 registered for Blue. And after today, I think we're going to get 40 more. What do you think? Research. First and foremost, Harvard is a research institution. And so we have a group of about 10 researchers, and we research quantitative, and we also do qualitative. The quantitative, we get about 5 gigabytes of data every single week. So we need 2 computer scientists, data scientists to crawl through the data and tell us things like where are people coming from, how old are they, how educated. Now, right now, we have about 69% that self-identify worldwide that already has a bachelor's degree and above. Well, that's great, but we're making courses. That means we're making courses for people that have already had an education. So we're trying very hard to lower that number and create courses that are also useful for people that are about to go into college. Maybe you're a high school student and it's very expensive. So the idea is they can take our courses, they're all free, and get an idea. Maybe they just take 10% or 20% of 5 courses, but they can already begin to get an idea. Wow, I thought I wanted to go into neuroscience. I don't want to do that anymore. Or, I never thought I wanted to go into neuroscience, and this is the coolest thing ever. Look at this claymation. So we're trying to reach less and less educated, if we can. A few statistics. Learners in the UN developing nations, a little over 500,000. 65% of our learners are logging in from outside the United States. How large is the Harvard community in terms of on campus?
Yes. So that we can compare.
It's a great question. What's that?
Google it.
Google it, yes. I'll get back to you. Would you Google that for me, please? I don't know. I think it's about 8,000 undergrads. It might be less. But you know what? You're coming back tomorrow and I'll find out. But we also have, it depends on how you count. We have about 11 hospitals that we're associated with. So when we count all of those, then you're talking about 18,000. But the campus and the primary graduate schools of education, like education, School of Public Health, then we're talking about smaller numbers. So in sum, we want to improve teaching through elective, because we do up to 3 versions. We want to provide access to high quality content, and we want to support flipped and blended classrooms. At Harvard, we always have to have our own name for things, so we call it hybrid. But the reality is, blended classrooms, flipped classrooms, when they finish making a lot of content with us, use that content in the classroom to teach the course as well. And we're just looking at how popular it would be for other professors to use other professors' content. And so that's typical with some of the tools, the technology tools that we make. We're very interested in reuse. And to give you an idea, Harvard and MIT together put their money together and they built a platform called edX. So edX goal is to distribute content worldwide. HarvardX courses and edX have people logging in from 195 countries. We found one person logging in from North Korea. And I'm pretty sure I know who that is. So it's just going on 4 years, and they've got about 96 universities partners. These are just a few. But when you look at edX and HarvardX, we represent a little over half of their entire community of learners. So when you think about it, when you're doing this in your own worlds, just do one course. Do one course at a time. Try it out, test it, do a little bit of casual or formal research, and see what works. But what I really want to tell you is, if you want to get involved in edX.org as a university, as an institution, it's a bit expensive. So what you could also do, this is free. You can download, so edX is a nonprofit, and they also support the open source community. So you can download the entire edX platform for free. When it's not difficult to set up, and it's not that difficult to run. So there's a big community. There are about 150 organizations, colleges, universities, and a couple of corporations, for example, are now using Open edX. there are 2 conferences a year, for example, that talk and convene meetings on open edX. It's a very cost-effective way to start up. So, for those of you that have been online, how many of you were online in the edX platform? It's a bit linear, right? You know, you go from one place and scaffolds, depending on your design. So we call this the L navigation. So in this particular case, do we have a pointer anywhere? I'm a little. Okay, so along the side, you have your curriculum. You have it broken into sections, and then there's subsections. Then there are components, and then there are units and then components. Across the top, for example, the icon on the far left says, this will be a movie, this will be a video. That icon, this will be an assessment, and so forth. So what's happening? Oh, that's not the changes. That's a movie, that's an assessment. And there are online instructions that you can learn the edX system. So here might be, this is week 1. Well, we're going to come down to week 5. I'm looking for birds. That's lovely. Scratch. So let's peek into, a lot of schools have science and cooking courses. They look at it oftentimes from a chemistry point of view. Our science and cooking course looks at science and cooking from a physics point of view, a chemistry point of view, and also a cultural point of view. So let's see what's cooking. Well, here's an example of more.
Scrambled eggs.
You're close. Who said scrambled
I
eggs?
said that one.
You're very close.
So here we have the heavy cream. Then we put a little bit of syrup. Gelatin. The gelatin, you always need to rehydrate it first. It's very stiff. They need like a bath to lose down the gelatin. It's a very stiff person. So you always put it in water first. And so we're gonna put the gelatin, the syrup with the cream, and then we're gonna have this beautiful strawberry puree. All right? You mix the whole thing. You're gonna strain to make sure there's no gelatin lumps anywhere. Pure, beautiful, tasty, sweet, delicious, and we put it in the canister. And then we put the nitro oxide. We make sure that gets to the right temperature. And take a look what we do. This what you see there is a strawberry powder. Dry strawberries, okay? That we make like a flour of dried strawberries. And we make the mousse of the strawberries. We cover it with more of the powder of dried strawberries. And we're going to introduce this in the liquid nitrogen. Only for a few seconds. What's happening right now? The outside is frozen. The inside is creamy. When we cut through, the inside is pure creaminess. The outside is pure hard shell. Ladies and gentlemen, a strawberry.
I'm going to talk about that class and say, please do this at home. There are instructions. We have chefs coming from all over the world. They're coming to visit. Maybe they have a book signing, they have a publication, and this course has been going. And so now we have chefs that call up and say, "Can I be in your science and cooking course?" It's already gone through 3 versions, and that's our rule: 3 versions, and then you graduate from Harvard X. We're going to do a 4th one. We're too excited about this. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today in our workshop. It isn't really a well-designed course, right, if we don't have our workshop goals. So when you're making a course, think about your goals. The goals are really what we want learners to know or to understand. That was what I had said earlier. It's not about what we want to teach. It's about what we want students to learn and to understand. So in the next 2 days, we test ways HarvardX works with faculty to create our massive open online courses and MOOCs. We want to demonstrate some examples of media technology and curricular activities to engage the learners. And then we want to learn tips from the real world course design. And just like a well-designed course, your course should have learning objectives. These objectives should be measurable evidence learners have met goals. So we need to define the phases of online course development. That's one of my objectives for you. I'm going to go through your rainbow chart. We want to increase awareness of what online courses can offer. Oftentimes people think of them as just text, maybe some images, maybe some video. And we're going to try to demonstrate a little bit about what you do when you have a tool, for example. At HarvardX is to showcase an environment that people often like to come visit, but they may never come visit. And even when you come to visit, you don't have access to the 19 million assets in our museums and libraries. And we want to go and see these ancient scrolls. Well, we're trying to bring those assets to the world. We want to talk about course design. Is that a concept that people are familiar with? So it's really about backward design in short is really what you want to end up with. So when faculty come to us and they say, I want to make a course, we have one faculty member and he's an expert on Egypt. And he has made literally hundreds of, with a company in France called DESARROLLO, he's literally made hundreds of 3D recreations of Giza. And so he brought in, I don't know, hundreds of 3D animations, all these images. And every time we went to have conversations with him, he kept focusing on, well, how can I use this? And this 3D is really cool. Where can I put that? We're like, hold on, it was taking us weeks to get past all the images. And so we're going to try to do a backward design. We're going to put all the images to the side, and we're going to focus on your goals, your objectives, and how you measure with what type of assessments to decide if your learners are understanding what you want to teach. And only after that do we want to start thinking about the media. Because we could put a whole lot of media in and it has nothing to do with objectives and goals, then it's a lot of pretty pictures, but it's not a well-designed course that we can measure whether we are getting across the information that we had set out to. At the end of this, you'll see a slide of resources, and there's one particular resource that it's a whole PowerPoint slide, completely in Spanish, all about breaking down backward design. And then we'll be applying tips and lessons learned to one's own course. So everybody has their rainbow chart. How many of you think that you might actually go and create your own course, your own online course? A few of you are interested. So whether it's excellent. So whether it's an online course or a course in the classroom, a lot of these phases might be relevant to you. This is how we do it at HarvardX. There are 3 phases of the entire production. Keep it in mind that it takes at least 9 months. It's a baby. It's interactive. In fact, I think David has 2 beautiful young children, 2 years old. You know what I think? when you have a baby, it's the most interactive project you can do. It has input devices, it has output devices, it has unpredictable paths, you know. You can so think of it as making an interactive project and making a baby. By the way, when I'm at Harvard, I don't make it. So the first one, this is when we are putting it all together. We're writing the objectives, we're working with the subject matter experts, we are reaching out and saying to ourselves, what can somebody outside of this particular faculty bring us? If we want to interview subject matter experts looking at something from another point of view, from a different cultural point of view, for example. This is where we are making it.
One question, please. How many hours in terms of being online or receiving the inputs that you have there? Then how many hours dedicated to that? Considering that we have, let's say, 9 months to prepare.
I'm writing down, we actually have a translation sheet that I'll bring tomorrow for that. But I can tell you in broad strokes. I can tell you 2 things definitively. At the end of this process, I have not had a single faculty member that did not say to me, could you have told me how much time this was going to take? I could have written a book by now. That's what it is. The other thing is, they just have this idea. So here's the questions I ask them during our onboarding, our orientation. I'll ask you, how many of you faculty have ever left yourself enough time to go to the copy center, copy your syllabus, and hand it out the next day? Anybody have that experience? Oh, your planners. You write your syllabus way before time, your planners?
We send online.
What?
We send the syllabus online.
Oh, you send it online. Okay, so you're not going to do that. But do you know your syllabus in advance? Yes? Good. I'm going to take your course. Every single faculty said, good. But of course I do it at the last minute. And I said, yeah, we're not going to do that. So we need to have people up front designing the course. And I would say, depending on how big your course is, this is obvious. How many videos, how many elements. We have some courses that our astrophysicist course is their life on another planet. That course has very few videos, but it has a lot of assessments, a lot of interactives. So that takes a little bit less time. It's the video, the shooting it, the travel to a location, the editing. If you've written a book and you get your galleys, your pages, and you write on it and mark it up and you revise your writing. Well, with video, you have to plan it out. Animation, you have to storyboard. And then, since none of us that are working on these courses are subject matter experts, sometimes, but most of the time not, we have to then send it for approvals. And faculty, as you know, are extremely busy, and we work around their schedule. That's actually one of the reasons it takes 9 months. If we were to do it full time together, you could get that down a little bit. So that's your development phase. Oh, the baby analogy again. This is your delivery phase. Okay, so in delivery, that's really when your course is live. It's live online, it's open. You know, you might want to put your content on and make it available a lesson per week and roll it out. Sometimes people, professors want to put it all out there so learners can do it at their own pace. Especially when you don't know a lot about your learners. You could have people that know a lot about your subject. We had we had 2 students in our planetary science course. We opened the course completely self-paced. It was version 2. Which typically, after version 1, we did version 2 self-paced. We put all the content out, and 2 learners completed it in 32 hours. So, we don't know, maybe they took version 1. I don't think they were cheating because we did a study with MIT and we discovered how people were cheating. If people want to know, I can tell you a little bit more of that. But actually, it might be interesting. We were having, there's a doctoral student at MIT, and he was interested in how people can cheat in the online courses. So he discovered that they had course because you don't register with your own name. So it was not a small number of people. And some of them were cheating in the philosophy course, like justice. Why would you cheat in an ethics course? I don't know. And you don't get a degree, you don't get credit. So, I don't know. So they were able, this young man was able to prove with his professor, they had 2 browsers open. They're both in the same course. They took the test in this one, and you can see answer depending on how you designed it. They got the answer, and they went over to this one. But they weren't very smart cheaters because we could tell that they were coming from the same IP address, and they were getting the answer right within 12 seconds of the other. It's like, you should at least wait a little time. So for all you people that want to cheat out there, wait a little bit longer, do it from 2 IP addresses. But that was just one example. That, in fact, is one example of some of the research that we've been doing. Now, we do make our data available. There's when we get to the research part, there's a URL on there. It's very difficult to do the type of research at scale when you don't have, millions and millions. Each course, you have millions and millions of points of data. So we're just now, you can share that data. You can sign up, and it's all, we take all the names off. It's all cleaned data. So delivery, it could be our shortest course. We're just going to debut it in September is 1 week. Our longest course is 15 months. And then we have everything in between. Some faculty want to come in and do their entire semester course. We can do that, but think about how long that takes. So oftentimes we say, why don't you start with a half a semester, for example, and then you get a feel for how to do it. So this is delivery, where you have teaching fellows available, you have online discussion groups, and this is when it is live, or it is at least is open for people from around the world to talk to each other in the discussion forums. And the third phase is something people often overlook, and that's really the archive phase. You saw the reel of all the different you've taken. Well, imagine putting that back into our library systems for reuse. So we literally track every frame of every video to make sure the copyright is secure, make sure it's public domain, or we make it ourselves. So everything has to go through archive and we tag the content. Because you often hear about people say, we have thousands of assets. Those assets can be video, animation. It's really not an asset unless you know where it is, how to find it, and what your capability of using it is. And so that's why archives is very important. We work very closely with the libraries for that. I feel like I'm coming in and out. Can you hear me okay? So it starts with a proposal. So what's in a proposal? Partial course description. You have your goals and objectives. Now, when Harvard X first began, I was not working there yet. It was just about a few people. They put a form online and said, faculty, come work with us. Fill out this form. We'll take your proposal, and then we'll make a course with you. And the proposals were terrible. And so I remember I spent the first 3 months, I was not the associate director, I was the director of apologies. Because I had to go from faculty to faculty, no, your proposal didn't get passed. And I was looking at these proposals thinking, what were they thinking? The problem was we were asking the wrong questions. Like I said earlier, what are your goals and objectives? Well, that's not a language I understood. I remember the day I went in. Has anybody seen Paper Chase? It's a movie that was from 20 years ago, and it's a movie about a Harvard faculty member. Anyway, I go into this faculty, the faculty office, person's office, and he's about 79 years old, very well known. He wrote the definitive book on contracts, for example. He's been the Solicitor General for the United States presidents. And he was about the 10th faculty I had introduced myself with. And he was the first one that didn't say, you can call me and tell the first name. It took 3 dates for me to have him say, you can call me, Tom, for example. And I walk in and there's this huge overwrought office, and he was in Ohio. And so he said, so I started thinking, I said, well, what if we co-produce this proposal with you? What if we talk to you about your ideas and we get it onto paper? Long story short, when the proposal came into the faculty committee, they said, what happened? And I said, well, we co-produced it with the faculty because we were asking the wrong question. And that was the day they said, let's do it for all faculty. So just the process of going through a proposal writing with the faculty, with an instructional designer, that in and of itself was a very big learning experience for us and for the faculty. So we talk about what kind of curriculum and activities. We think about curricular design, and I tell the faculty, you're the curriculum designer. Curriculum design is the what we're going to teach. Well, they all know what they want to teach. We're the instructional designer, so we're the how. So they bring the what, we bring the how. And it's a beautiful marriage. Temporary. Until we get divorced. So you said, who are your target audiences? And we talk a lot about what kind of prior knowledge do you expect people to have, what grade band, that type of thing. This in a MOOC, I have to say, this is by far the most challenging because the target audience in a MOOC could really be everybody. So we think about how can we break it down into cohorts for people that are just learning the subject to people that are very advanced. It's very tricky and we really have not done very well at that. That can need a lot of improvement. We ask them, do you want to just do this course online? One of the questions I ask during this process is, why do you want to do a MOOC at this time? I've had everything from, why does the climber climb the mountain? Because MOOCs are there. And then we have people saying, because I want to learn the new technologies, or maybe they've had a good experience, and oftentimes one of their colleagues has done it. So is it online only? Do they have a goal to have it be in the campus, a hybrid, a flipped, a blended? And then what type of cross-collaboration, if any? For faculty, depending on the discipline, are not that used to working with other faculty, unless you're in astronomy. In astronomy, you can't really do your research without collaboration. I find that in the humanities, a lot of the humanities faculty I work with, they tell me they never work with the group to think about their course. We're isolated and everything in between. So what kinds of collaboration can we have? Thank you. And then if they have any research interest, we talk about that. Every course we make has to have a research component, whether the faculty is interested in it or not. We'll come up with research. Do learners watch longer videos, shorter videos? We do A/B testing. We look at research questions like mind wandering, for example. David, what time do you want to do break?
It's up to you, Annie. It's scheduled for 4:30, so like if you want to end it earlier, no problem. After 4.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Any questions so far? Any answers?
Comments?
next phase on your rainbow chart is onboarding. I never used that word before in my life until I came to Harvard X. It's really a word to say, how are we going to orientate the faculty and their teaching assistants into the process of creating a MOOC with us? It's about a 3 or 4 day, meaning 3 or 4 meetings. So the first day is really administrative. We go over budgets and resources. We do the production overview with the rainbow chart. We talk a lot about teams and the roles and responsibilities. We have faculty that have never, they've written all their own assessments, all their tests, and they don't use anybody to help. And then we have other faculty that have a whole team of workers and of assistants and everything in between. We review timelines. Here's my consejo. Online course development always takes longer than it takes. It's just a rule. Okay. So the team, you have to have at least one subject matter expert, faculty and their teaching assistants. Instructional designer, we call them producers or project leads. Instructional designers for us, we seldom hire people that come from traditional instructional design. There are a lot of reasons for that. For me, it's really because I come from a public television background. And we really are looking for people that are thinking about things that people have really not done before. And my experience, when people go through a whole instructional design degree, I would encourage people to do so. But remember that those are just frameworks. We have over 85 courses that we've done, and no two really look alike. They look alike because they're all on the edX platform, but other than that, they use assessments in different ways, media in different ways. There's all kinds of differences in each course. So our instructional designers really have 4 key skills. Project management, they understand curricular and pedagogy development. They don't have to be too technical because the platform is pretty easy, but they can't be afraid of technology. We've had a couple that come in and type like this and aren't really conversant with the technology. Not only would it make their job harder, it's not really the impression we want to make on faculty, who themselves could be very afraid of technology. And then the 4th part of it is we want them to have an understanding or at least appreciation for media production. Content developers, people that come in, graduate students, undergraduate students. We had a couple of examples this year that might be useful for all of you. One in particular on the Giza Egypt project I mentioned. When you think about graduate students today are the faculty of tomorrow. And I don't know why this took me 3 years to figure this out, but if we take the graduate students and in addition to being content developers, writing the content, doing the research, why not have them have part of their studies? So in the Giza example, he has 2 doctoral students, and they have a small 2-person graduate seminar. And in that graduate seminar on campus, for credit, they're learning how to design curriculum. They're learning how to teach. They're learning how to learn. And they're learning how to teach other people how to learn. And then in their paid position, they actually write content for us. And so content developers, so my consejo for this is think about the advantages that your graduate students could have if they're working with you on their online courses. Because just in a few years from now, they'll be faculty and they'll be going into their profession already knowing a lot of this. Now, we have very few technical resources. We often contract that out. We've made a few tools in-house, but we like to have educational technologists around. And there's technologists and they're developers, but an educational technologist, the content drives. It's not, oh, I can do this, I can do that. It's all about how can we represent the content that you can't do in any other way. So they have technical skills, but they're driven by education. Media assistants, you know, you need somebody to help you film, you need somebody to draw the illustrations, animations. This is a really hard job. We have a full-time lawyer that looks at the copyright. We've got to do a lot of image researching, and we only use things that we've made ourselves, public domain. Harvard owns it, or we can use what they call, I think we have a couple of lawyers in the crowd, right? Use what we call educational transformative fair use. You can't teach it in any other way. And then people to help us put the content on the platform and to check it for any errors. Day 2, this is really fun. I call it holding school. So we ask the faculty to come in, so there's 60 people at Harvard X, and for 1 hour, the course teams are 3 to 4 Harvard X people at the most, and then we get part-time people. But we're all there because we get to learn about all these really cool subjects. So before a course gets started, we ask the faculty to come in with no notes off the top of their head for about 45 minutes, and then there's about 15 minutes of questions. They talk to us about the essence of their course. What gets them up in the morning to come teach their course? And anybody at Harvard X can come. We've had people on our finance team. Anybody can come. And that's important for everyone to have a shared understanding of the faculty's vision. And then when you're walking around, we're one big office, we're walking around and you say, well, when I was at that school on malaria the other day, I was thinking we could do this. So have a shared understanding, we call it holding school. So here's an example. Last week, these gentlemen were talking to us about probability and statistics. They're hilarious. And so just watching them interact, we had all these ideas flowing. People that will never even touch the course can tell you what would interest them, and it makes for a much more vibrant course. An hour out of their week. And that's us. So we have this long table, and so that's about half of our group. But only a few of them will work on the course, but all of them get to give their ideas. Day 3, we're brainstorming the media approach. We have brainstorms with the media team. And then we demonstrate only a couple of media approaches. Because if you start with the media first, the faculty will say, well, when do I get into the studio? When can I do a test shoot? And I say, well, when did you finish your backward design? So you do your learning objectives, your goals, your learning objectives, how it will be assessed, and then you start to make the media to support it. And making the media is expensive, and you really want to make it purposeful. So what we try to do is go for the design first, and then we start to talk about the media. So one of the things they all want to know about, though, is how they're going to do on camera and what kind of interview they might have with their colleagues. So we made this reel just to show them we do on location, but this is an example of what we do in the studio. And this is just a conference room that we converted.
Look one side. We have multiple spaces and operating areas. A white background provides a clean, focused setting for an individual instructor to engage their audience. Graphics work here too, and so does this. Let's see some other options. A black background is another classic option available here in G25. Graphics work well here too. This space provides the potential for standing or sitting. There's also room for more people. Hey! Whether whether standing in front of a camera or having a table discussion, another presence on screen allows us to achieve a more conversational tone. Gray is a versatile backdrop that lends a pleasing aesthetic to your video. A classic element of lecturing, our painted chalkboard gives you the ability to write or draw on camera. Using custom transparencies, we can project images. This is me talking about cellular biology. Me talking about T.S. Eliot. Talking about architecture. Or me talking about anything. This analog solution can bring immediate context, or simply enhance the plain background. Voiceover can be recorded here in studio as well. An additional video aesthetic to consider is eyeline. The main options are looking to camera, away from camera, or to another person on camera. Each create a specific field of the video, which can affect how the viewer perceives it. It can be combined with effects like stock photography. This example, taken from the GSD course, The Architectural Imaginary, illustrates a conceptual point of remapping the city of Paris. This is one of many examples of how the studio can facilitate creative alternatives to the traditional talking head. So these are the main in-studio setups we have to help you shape a look for your online course videos. Thanks for watching, and happy filming.
That studio was just 2 conference rooms. We knocked down 1 wall, very effective. And then over the course of a few years, we began to get more equipment depending on need. But we started out very, very simple. Now, we had one professor recently from the law school. He's teaching a course on bioethics and reproductive technologies. And he came in and he said, black, white, gray, that won't do. And he wanted pink, he wanted blue, he wanted green, he wanted yellow. And so when one faculty does it, then the next person wants it. And it's actually quite exciting because each course we learn something new. Those transparencies that go into the lights, those are crazy cheap to do. You just put a piece of transparency in your laser printer, and again, I'll use these as an example. We took one of the professor's photographs from ancient Egypt, and then it was a drawing, and then we put it onto this transparency and we put it over the light. So it looks fancy, it appears fancy, but it was really inexpensive. So, animated course introduction. We don't like to get too far into the media. Tomorrow, maybe later today and tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit more about different media types we've done. Recently, we've been experimenting with paper cuts. And when you think about that stop action, cameras today, your digital camera in your pocket, not your phone, but hold up your camera, please. These cameras today actually have stop action in them. And so we built for $400, we built a rig, just glass with 4 layers, with 4 wooden posts. In fact, I didn't even know they were doing it. All I could hear was this drilling, and I have a woodworking shop in my own house that I made in my attic. And so I was excited to see the power tools, and they were building a stop action rig because they made it up and thought it up, and they created it with the camera on top, and then you move it, click, move it, click, move it, click. Free software on the web, connects to your camera. I've got to know who you are. Do you work in media?
Well, I'm a graphic designer.
You're a graphic designer, because I can say that some of this is. Tell me about you. Can you imagine doing some of this stuff?
Yeah, when I was studying for different projects, I built things. So I can only working with not much money. That's way.
So when you think about that, yeah. But how did you learn graphic design? By doing?
Graphic design, I learned in this university.
This university has a lot of concentrations in mothers. Remember, my visa lasts for 10 years. So imagine, you want to come, tell me your name? You all need to know Gabrielle, but people like Gabrielle. Because there are people in Young University. You can find her on talent and try making things up. Try something you're not even sure will work. Now you talked about, right? Pablo talked about you made your MOOC up to 5 times before you got it to a place that you wanted.
Yeah.
About that process.
Well, I blundered a lot. I kept hitting walls because I tried once, I didn't like the result. I tried twice, 4. By the 5th time, I managed to get the hang of it. I had to learn how to do a script because I didn't have one. And I thought it was just going to recite myself on the camera, and it wasn't the same stuff. So I had to learn a lot of things. I think it's much closer to a mixture between writing a book and a film.
Writing a book and making a film. Interesting.
It is related with that. What happens if you have a Nobel Prize and the guy is really bad at teaching, and you really think that this could be a good approach on making a MOOC course for? So the guy wants to teach, but the artist and they say no, this guy not deliver. It's not good. So and then you have the script. I mean, because you really have to have a script for animation and all. So there is a moment when you are more creative. Happen with but bottom line, this is the way that you have to teach in PowerPoint. So how you mix that? I mean, because many times you get really enthusiastic about making this really funny, really entertaining, but there is a subject. There is something that you have to teach and you have to evaluate that. So that equilibrium has to be made. I don't know how.
Well, so it sounds like, how do you do it? How do you work with somebody that may not be accustomed to performing on camera and maybe taking their dissertation and book and making it into 1,000 words into 100 words? It takes time. One of the things that we do is we have volunteer workshops. Every Wednesday from 3 to 4, we have a time blocked off in case somebody wants to volunteer. And the workshop, so we do about 2 a month. The workshop that we're having from our theater department, for example, they're coming in and they're teaching us because we struggle with this. We struggle with how do you take all this information and fit it into a place that somebody can actually have the time to go through. So it's less is more. So we're doing a workshop on what we call page to stage or page to screen. So when you're writing your dissertation or your book, and you know that what's in the book is still only about 20% of all that you know. But when you put it online, you have to edit it down even more, right? So we have people that come in and they usually volunteer. They're often from parts of the other university. We're in a town full of universities as well. That you were at Boston University, for example, right? So we have, there's a school in Boston called Emerson School, and they specialize in theater training and making movies. A lot of Emerson kids go on to work in the film industry, sometimes in Hollywood. We actually asked them to come in and talk to us about how do we cut it down. We have faculty that can't script. They can script, or we can help them script, but they can't speak to camera with that because it's so unfamiliar. We have a teleprompter, for example. So what we do now is we'll hold up cards just with an idea. So we'll get them down to those sound bites. And so we also have a woman from our theater department. We had one woman who English was her second language, and she was very scared. Now I can speak in front of an audience, but turn the camera on, and I'm very marketing, and it just doesn't work, so I don't do it. But what she did, she came in, and the faculty was just eyes like a deer in a headlight. And so we called in our talent coach, who's all volunteer, Sarah, and she cleared the room, cleared that little conference room, and she worked with this woman, and she made her into a lemon. So she's a lemon, and then she's a lion, then she's a lemon, then she's a lion, and before you know it, she forgot. She was just totally outside herself. She was like, her adrenaline's going, and so then the next time, clear the room. She's a lemon, she's a lion. The third time, she's like, no, you guys can stay. That was her warm-up activity. So when it comes to performance, we can do a lot to work with people. One of the things we found, and then we'll go back to the writing, one of the things we found is not everybody wants to be in a studio. It's cost effective for us to have everybody in a studio. But one of the things I asked my team is, go sit in their lecture hall and see how they teach. And then come back and say, this is not going to work. He talks nonstop for an hour. And so we just get a feel for the teaching style. More commonly, they're fantastic, they're like dramatic, and then they get on the camera and they freeze. So we take them into their office. We had 2 faculty that said, can you just film me at my house? But don't you touch anything in that house, you know. So we went to the professor's house. And one of the professors, she wanted to have a dinner party. And she invited her to 5 cameras to do this. I was not happy until I saw the result. It was fabulous. So, because you could just imagine they're eating, they're filming, but we had so much pre-production plans. So we go into the house and they have their little pre-party and they're talking about ideas, and then we get people discussing. So we think about what really works for them, what works in the classroom, what brings them out when they're just talking to somebody. So we really try to get to know. A big part of that 9 months, those first 2 or 3 months, we're getting to know each other. We're getting trust between us, right? Because they don't want to look silly on camera. We've only had, I'd say, 1 or 2 situations where they just said, I can't do this. And so in one case, she really just didn't want to do the course. In another case, we used voiceover, for example. So we think about all the different tools that we have. Is that answering your question? Do other people have ideas for this situation?
If you have a very good script and you know what you want, you can hire an actor. If you have everything ready, you just hire an actor, track them up.
You make voiceover.
The voiceover, that's exactly right. The voiceover. Yeah, but you could do an actor.
No, you can do it.
Go ahead.
You can do that too. On the way you actor, that's like Charles Chaplin, something like that. And you make a voiceover. And everybody's going to be very attached to this video. I can assure you.
Yeah, after break, I'll cue it up while we're at break. I'll bring up, we have, in the Boston area, things are very old, or maybe not as old as like Machu Picchu and some of the mountains and such as here on here, but 300-year-old. So we have these historical homes that are open for people to tour. And we heard that there was this one guy that recreated things as he was an actor. He was the host. So we said, would you like to come over and be in our studio and read Edgar Allan Poe? And so after the break, I'll call up to show. So we actually brought in an actor. But we don't do that very often because, remember, one of the reasons we want the faculty to work with us is because we want to help give them confidence to reimagine what they're doing in their own classroom, in their own environment. But sometimes we definitely go for that. We have one place where we have an iPad that will be right next to the camera, and some people want to see their kids. In one case, I'm making this up. You can't make this stuff up. They wanted to see Paul Newman. Okay, bring in Paul Newman, please. So we do whatever it takes, and people are really starting to think about, when you're in a flipped classroom, for example, you have your students look at your lectures online, and hopefully they're not terribly long, and then come into the classroom and they use that time for discussion instead of just watching it. So we use as many tricks as we can to get people to relax. The team that works in the video department, they're crazy, they're fun, they're just crazy fun. All of the editors that we use, they do things in their real life. They're making their own films in their own time. So every single situation is slightly different. Thank you. Okay. So even though we're very early in the stage, we show a little bit of video, a little bit of animation, and then when we get into production, we show a lot more. But I just wanted to share with you, we're doing a 6-part course on religious literacy. It started with one module, it's for the Divinity School of Harvard. We talk about having faculty work together. 6 faculty all knew each other, sort of. And it took about 2 months of meetings before they were even on the same page with how they were going to do it. So the first course, 4 weeks, is on religious literacy. Then we do Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism. Next year, we'll add to that, we will do Sikhism and indigenous religions. So let me just show you an animation. And the goal of the course is really to understand each other. There's no real right answers when talking about religion, but there's probably a lot of wrong answers. And knowing that, I mean, we're at a Catholic university. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. And, you know, we're all as different as can be, but we might share the same religion. So we decided to do it in animation for this first part.
I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, actually, which is a really...
I'll show you that animation in a second. This is a different point. Remember we talked about you may never know your students because they're online. We're in Boston. They could be in New York, you still never will meet their faculty. Or they could be in the next town over, let alone be across the world. So one of the things we started to do, especially in this religious business, and we'll show the animation in a bit, we're starting to do biographies, short 2-minute biographies. Who is this person teaching me? Where are they coming from? What's their perspective? Why are they interested in teaching this course? And why should I be listening to them? So this is a new concept for us, although we should have thought of it years ago. And so this is an example of the woman that Diane Moore, fabulous to work with. So we said, would you help us try this? And we did it for all 6 faculty of the 6 different religions. So this is Diane.
I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, actually, which is a really important dimension of why I became interested in religion. I grew up there in the 1960s, the height of the civil rights movement, and in a community, a congregation there that was located right in the University of Michigan campus. And that congregation was incredibly involved in the civil rights issues of the day, also other concerns around anti-war, nuclear disarmament, poverty. And I grew up thinking that religion was always about attention to critical issues in contemporary life. Religion is not always a good or a bad influence. Religion is both. Religion has many manifestations. Religions are used to promote peace. Religions are used to thwart peace. They have always done so. They do so in a contemporary way. So to assume that Islam, for example, is a religion of peace is as problematic as assuming that it is exclusively a religion of terror. Islam is a religion. Christianity is a religion of peace as well as used to be a religion of terror. What I love most about teaching is creating an atmosphere and a space for people to explore fundamental questions of meaning. It's about discovery. It's about seeing old things in a new way. It's about a deeper understanding that almost always brings hope. You often from tremendously diverse backgrounds, tremendously diverse religious convictions. coming together to wrestle with some of the most critical questions of our time, with earnest conviction, open-heartedness, and humility. And that combination can create remarkable moments, remarkable epiphanies, remarkable communities.
So we made one of these for each of the 6 professors, and they brought in photos from their families. We just sat and talked to them and learned more about who they are. So their learners, near and far, could have a better understanding of the perspective they're bringing. That's my next concept. We've seen some stuff. Now I wanted to show you one more, and then we'll go to break. I think this is. Let me just check.
I grew up.
Okay. So sometimes you just want to put pictures together, again for the same course. It's our hope that seeing people of all different walks of life with sharing a religion begin to break down the barriers, and while seeing other people's religion and seeing things that are so familiar, just open thoughts about, we all belong to different religions, or none at all. To bring a little empathy and a little religious literacy to the world. So my tip there is collect photographs and images from friends and from websites offering public domain, but confirm the copyright use. And with that, we can take a couple questions and then go to break. Or it doesn't have to be questions, it could be suggestions. Why didn't you do this?
Perdón, por si acaso también pueden hacer las preguntas en español. Ani tiene también la traducción así que no se sientan intimidados si es que no quiero hacer la pregunta en inglés, háganla en español. ¿Sí? Gracias.
Preguntas y answers. Respuestas.
Regarding that thing about copyright, if we use just 2 or 3 seconds of the song, do we also have to be aware of the copyright issues?
I'll say every single time I ask them anything. It depends. It's not the length. It's not the length. Your specific question was music. It's not the length. It's really about who owns it, how do they make it available. So not every university is as strict as we are. We think at Harvard we have a big target on our backs because, oh, I love to sue Harvard. And because it's available worldwide, we really do, and we are very careful. There are situations, music for example, we have a course on copyright law. This is a very interesting example. That course is now in its fourth version. The fourth version, they took it back into the law school to do. The copyright law, I thought, why would people in other countries want to learn about US copyright? It was so popular that it's now taught in 19 countries where faculty took the course and then they use the course and teach it themselves. And they learn a lot about what does copyright mean? Does it mean I can use it as long as I don't charge for it? I can use it as long as I'm not defaming somebody. It's very complex. We get to the point where we're looking at an image. So we're doing a shoot coming up in a very prominent library, and we even have to be, a museum. We even have to be aware of all the art on the walls because maybe that artist didn't agree that you were going to use their image. What if we use their image in a way, or the image that they made? What if they made it for something that was anti-Catholic? And we use it to say, yay, this is pro-Catholic. So you have to be very aware of what environment was that image made, by whom, and to what purposes. So for us, we pay attention to all of those things. It's really great when we can use what we call transformative educational fair use. That really came into being with the case, I think, 2006, where if you're going to teach a course on Einstein, you can't really do that without using photographs of Einstein. So we use it and say it's transformative educational fair use. We've used movie clips that were 30 seconds long, but the faculty is speaking over it, the faculty is pausing it, and then making a point. So it also depends on how you're going to use it. Does that make sense? Question?
It's a very simple one, actually. It looks like it's not a recommendation at all, just to think that I have this course and this is the way that we are going to do it, and I will upload whatever I think, and that is EPC, something like that. There has to be a kind of minimum standard, some things that is necessary here to set up before beginning to do this. Otherwise, everyone will appear with some idea and will say, well, I'm ready. So it looks like you need a team for doing at least a basic one.
I think you do need a team, at least more than one or two, because remember, we're trying to put the learner at the center of our thinking. And I personally would think it's very hard to do if I'm just talking to myself, right? And people bring different perspectives to it. That's one of the reasons we hold school before we do a course. These these really intelligent project designers, and when people know too much about a topic, they often forget the time when they didn't know anything. So I think, in fact, we have a professor, Michael Springer, he's teaching people how to use data with programming R. And I said, well, Michael, what do you think? He goes, who cares what I think? He didn't say I'm an expert, but he basically said, I know a lot about this. And he said, out the audience. So I think one of the reasons you want to have a team, or at least hold school with people from different walks of life, we hire finance people, but they don't do finance 24 hours a day. When people that know nothing about what you're teaching ask you a question or make a suggestion, you often have this light go off and you think, how did I miss that? How did I make it? so complicated when all they were saying, I remember I was at a dinner party and I had just taken a wine course, which I was terrible at. And so I learned, names of wines, and this woman says to me, Annie, what's Malbec? And I said, well, it's a grape that started in Argentina, but there are vines in Cabo spreads, blah, 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 blah. She said, is it white or is it red? And I went, oh my God. And so it's those simple questions. Not only do you want a team that brings in those different skills, but you're so diverse online in the classroom. It's nice when I was in public broadcasting, which is called PBS, there was a show that still goes today called NOVA. It's a science program. I'm not kidding. Let's ask science. Let's ask Annie. Let's see if she gets it. And so eventually I realized, well, that's okay. And then I would ask a question and they'd say, oh my God, I missed that. So I think part of that is try not to look in the mirror. Try to look through the window. And I think that's part of why I also want to be a team of at least influencers. Shall we take a break?
Okay. Thank you very much. Pequeño refrigerio aquí afuera. Tienen los que necesiten el traductor simultáneo. Pueden recabarlo a la mesa del fútbol. Y nuevamente motivarles a que hagan más preguntas en español.
¿Tú?
Wow. Wow.
No he llegado a ver. Pero a ver, ¿qué más se va?
No es broma, tenemos el programa tenemos que hacerlo para iniciar esa transición.
Sí.
Se nos ha hecho el diseño. Yes, it's part of the ideas. Me gusta como un repertorio. Estamos creando una idea para empezar
Hola nuevamente. Vamos a comenzar. Quería por favor pedir que las preguntas pueden ser en español, que entiende perfecto el español, que en dado caso cualquiera de nosotros puede ayudar. Además, ella también tiene un traductor del español al inglés, así que por favor tomen esta oportunidad de hacer las preguntas que ustedes deseen. ¿Okay? Y la profesora está totalmente abierta a ser interrumpida cuando ustedes necesiten o tengan alguna duda sobre lo que ella está expresando. Toda la traducción bien, sin problemas. Los que estén con traducción. El curso súper. Están todos dormidos. Creo que vamos a poner así como era. We are the lions.
The lemons,
Bueno, gracias. Gracias, Ani.
Gracias a ti. Can you hear me now?
We are the lions.
We are the lions. You came back. So we last finished this episode, on the last episode, so somebody asked and suggested, thank you sir, maybe we hire an actor. As I mentioned, we don't, is this on? As I mentioned, we don't typically hire actors because we want to bring out the skills and performance of faculty, and then sometimes we just can't resist. And we do, actually it reminds me, recently we have been hiring voice over talent because to voice over content, when you do a voiceover, it's not obvious, but that's a form of acting. And so we are trying to use more and more voice talent, and we do coaching for voiceover with faculty. Sometimes success, sometimes not so much. But this is an example. Somebody mentioned green screen. So green screen is when you put a solid background behind the person you're filming. People typically use a very bright green or very bright blue. And the idea is you want it to be a color that is so different than what you'd be wearing or what your skin would be, that when the editor brings it into their editing machine, by the way, we're using Macintosh and Final Cut Pro, and I can answer more questions if you have questions about software on the production side. So we don't typically use green screen because it tends to look fake. On the other hand, it's really handy, especially it's very, very cost effective. So what you're about to see is a person, professional actor, he does a lot of historical tours, and he just seemed to be somebody that would be good for Edgar Allan Poe. We've been doing Poetry in America. We're on our 6th module for Poetry in America, starting from early New England to modernism. And so this is Edgar Allan Poe, and we didn't ask this gentleman, we didn't pay him, he volunteered, and we did not ask him to wear anything in particular. He just showed up the way he showed up. And also green screen, what you want to do is you want to have your talent to be far enough away from the wall, because if you have shadows, it's very difficult to take the person out of that scene. So you want to put a scene in the background. Let me just, pictures say it all.
Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils, and drowned in tears, sit in a theatre to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Minds in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly. Mere come and go at bidding of vast, formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible woe. That motley drama, oh, be sure it will not be forgotten, with its phantom chased for evermore, and a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth unto the self-same spot, and much of madness, and more of sin, and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling rises from out the scenic solitude. It rides, with mortal pangs, the mind become its food, and seraphs saw that vermin fangs in human gore imbue. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form the curtain, a funeral ball, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and its hero, the conqueror, Rome.
Very easy for us to make, and we put in the images what we'll fix it in post-production. Later we'll learn a little bit about production is where you acquire, you shoot the content, you film it, you write the content, you gather the images. Post-production is when you put it all together. So oftentimes if we mess something up, if we make a mistake, we say, oh, we'll fix it in post. So this is something that we got the images. I'm not exactly sure where we got them, but I want to go back to make a couple comments about some of the copyright questions that I received today. So in the United States, copyright, what we call public domain, anything that happened before, I think it's 1923, anything that was created before 1923 is public domain. In the United States, from content made in the United States. Internationally, it's 1895. So if you are able to find images and things that were made before 1895, usually, but not always, because it depends, but usually but not always, content that was made before 1895 can be public domain. Now you might come across Shakespeare content and you think, well, that's the 1600s, it's way before 1895. But where you really have to pay attention is, but when was it translated and who translated it? So you may have very old content but it's done in a more modern interpretation. So the underlying content may be public domain, but the newer interpretation would not be. And I'm going to pretend not to be I'm pretending to be a lawyer here, but that's just an oversimplification. So we're going to go into, let's see, PowerPoint 2. What's that? Oh, I'm going to show the animation. Only that, right? Hold on one second. Ooh. Here's an example that it's not animation. I'll find the religious animation. The example I'm going to show now is not easy to do, but it's terrifically exciting and it's brand new for us. And it's a combination of stop action that we saw a little bit of stop action earlier, but it's paper cuts. So this is an extraordinary artist that we have on contract that made a paper cut to demonstrate a scientific concept within our cell biology course, focusing on mitochondria. And if you'd like to ask anything else about the content of that course, I can't help you. But I wanted to show you something that is interesting, and I think in many cultures, people make these paper cuts. And so you may see different flags, and I think it's in Mexico, yes, where people are for parties, they're taking tissue and they're making these paper cuts. Well, think about those paper cuts, and maybe you have people in your community that make these paper cuts. But let me just show you what we've done with this particular one. Okay, I'm going to pretend it's on endosymbiotic cooperation and evolution. Does anybody know about this topic? Okay, so I'll just pretend. Oh, you know, okay.
There is fantastic, rich complexity in the world around us. But the beauty and the cruelty of existence is not something we can always handle alone. That struggle to survive extends beyond us and includes all life on the planet. There are seemingly endless menagerie of creatures who live, compete, and sometimes help one another as they populate the earth. Even the very smallest are an important part of this web of life. But how did this come to be? For us to find out, let's go back to a time of ancient competition and see how a simple prokaryotic cell, no more than a membrane, nucleic acids, and proteins, evolved a remarkably beneficial relationship to help it thrive. Billions of years ago, these early cells lived in rich waters, searching for energy. Some cells received energy from molecules directly. Some of those cells became energy sources for others. While still other cells evolved the ability to split water molecules as an energy source. But the more oxygen released in this reaction changed the very atmosphere of the planet and likely harmed other prokaryotes. Many didn't survive. But what's this? Here is a cell that evolved to use oxygen as a powerful energy source, allowing it to thrive in this new oxygen-rich environment. But the cell still competed for survival in a dangerous world. Then something remarkable happened. A larger cell engulfed our little oxygen-using cell, but this time, the little cell survived inside its host. The smaller cell could harness energy from oxygen, but this time from the safety of its new home. Energy that it needed, allowing it to share energy with the larger host cell. In return, the host cell providing nutrients and safety from predators. This relationship was simply too good to end. Over generations, the two cells' descendants exchanged DNA and became dependent on each other for survival, living as one organism in an evolutionary process called endosymbiosis. This mutually beneficial relationship only deepened over time, allowing the evolution of what we know as the eukaryote, with a true nucleus and organelles that complete specialized tasks. And what about that little oxygen-consuming cell? It evolved into the mitochondria, which harnesses most of the energy in eukaryotic cells. In your body now, a mitochondrion can maintain an electric field across its membrane of 30 million meters, a potential that is equal to the energy released by a bolt of lightning in the sky. This energy supported the evolution of even more structures in more diverse combinations, changing and building one another over time. All of the varied multicellular life on Earth derives from that cooperative relationship in our ancient past. Had it not been for this chance to exist as it does today, it all began with cells evolving to cooperate and create new possibilities for life.
First of all, the faculty that did the voiceover, it took him about 3 takes, which is not bad, which sparked the idea of us trying to use an alternative form of media, such as paper cuts. Was I actually went to, oftentimes I'm too involved in the content because I'm the one that's managing all the people getting involved in the content. But this time, one of the producers and I went to the Harvard Comparative Zoology Library, one of the most well-known, E.O. Wilson hangs out. And we went into the back archives and we weren't allowed to touch anything. And then they would take these books off the shelf and we'd look, and we were so excited, and then they were all in black and white, and it was going to be hard to scan because and we just needed an approach that brought it to life in a way that even if you're taking this course just for a general ed, just to get a requirement out of the way, I look at things like that and I think, I might actually remember to give people an experience in ways that you can't easily do any other way. You could do it with some animation, you might be able to do it with some 2D or 3D. We don't have money for 3D. So this was an experiment, and we're waiting it 2 weeks ago. So we're waiting for feedback from the learners. This professor is also our faculty director, Dr. Robert Liu, and one of the things he's experimenting with is using narrative stories to tell concepts in science. And I'm not sure we'll be able to show that tomorrow because I'm not sure it's posted yet, but I'll take a look. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. So let's see where we are on the rainbow chart. So we have a long ways left, but I jumped ahead a little bit because it's fun. So here we have the research line. We really want to get research. We have to do every project or course that we make, as I mentioned, always has some type of research component, even if it's just going through the data for quantitative. But usually we like to have different approaches to the research. So you'll see in that line it says research, pedagogy, and analytics. We like to study science of education, but we're also very interested in the overall analytics of how it's doing, what parts do people find difficult, what can we learn from version 1 that we can put into version 2. The professor that we're working with who's in charge of our research, Dr. Dustin Tigley, his whole methodology, he's in government science stats, he studies ways to automate, to go through massive amounts of data through automated algorithms that he and his team write. For example, with our China X series, remember it was the 15-month, 10-part course. So when he first came over to talk about He asked here has read every post in the discussion forum for China X, expecting no human being could do that. Well, a man who was working with China for 3 years to work with us, and he actually read every post, but normally that's not normal. So what we did with Dr. Tingley is we took his algorithms, or he did it for us, and it crawled algorithmically through our discussion forums and brought up the most important, the most salient topics that were discussed that week. And that way, we could automatically see what were the questions that were most asked that week, the topics that people found either most interesting or most difficult or somewhere in between. And from that, we were able to then take those questions and topics and hold office hours, a virtual office hour, with the professor and his grad students. And we brought them into the studio. Actually, for a while, we just used the camera on the laptop in an office. It was low production values, but high on content depth. And he said, well, it looks like many of you had problems with the dynasty, people asking all those questions. And he was able to respond to these questions without having to have read through everything because of this algorithmic approach. So when you're thinking about standing up your courses, think about because the digital campus, it's never quite dry. A book gets published, then you might have a digital version. But we can continue, resources permitting, we can continue to evolve these courses. And the more research we do, the better we can make our courses the 6th version. If you're interested in learning more about what we do with our research group, you can log on to this URL. And this site is evolving because they're spending so much time doing the research. We're not spending enough time keeping track of the website. But this will give you a start. You can see some of the papers that have been written. If you would like to sign up, and this is new as of 4 months ago, if you would like to sign up and use our massive amounts of data to experiment in your own work, you would apply for this question.
You mentioned that whenever you have an online course, you have to do research.
Yes.
So my question is, so each professor has to do this research report after they finish their online course?
Not really. We've had professors tell us, I don't care what you do with your research on my course, don't ask me for any time and don't get in the way of my pedagogy. All the way to, wow, can we do this? Especially the faculty in the areas of teaching and learning and that in wanting to improve based on the data that we gather. And then we have social science people that are really trying to understand. We're looking at right now a technology that we might develop ourselves. It's been developed with two guys at one of the schools just to experiment. And what they've made is something called pseudonymous. So you have anonymous, and then you have eponymous, which means I know who you are and you're making yourself known. But what happens when you're dealing with very provocative subjects? This happens to be a law school course. And they're dealing with cases of sexual assault. They're dealing with cases of legalizing marijuana, dealing with cases where in his physical classroom, he saw people not speaking up. They didn't want to speak up with people knowing, what if they asked the wrong question? What if they made a racial error? What if they were culturally insensitive accidentally? So he and one of his grad students, over a weekend, put together what they call threads. Now, threads is an ability to do in the classroom to take on a persona such as, I'm a giraffe, I'm a horse. Very, very non-controversial. And so his experiment in his classroom was, would people speak up more if nobody knew who was saying something? But the reason that's not anonymous is that horse, that giraffe, builds that persona over time. So pretty soon, you begin to think, okay, here comes the horse. I know what she or he's going to say. And then, halfway through the course, it becomes more public engagement. So his experiment was, do people speak more freely after they've spoken their mind? And it ended up working. And it was only about 60 people. And one of our course producers on my team sat in his classroom and went through the whole process. So then Charlie's a great guy. Charlie's about 80, and he's one of a very well-known professor wrote in his first book, to my friend Charlie, who seems crazy until a year later. And Charlie, this is one of Charlie's year later moments. And so he says, okay, Annie, we're going to use threads. I said, Charlie, it barely worked for 60 people, and we're going to get about 14,000 people. So this is one of the things we might create. And we're nervous about it. We're nervous about abuse and that type of thing online. So we're going to try. So we're going to put more teaching fellows in that delivery phase, that online course, to watch for bad behavior. And knock on wood, but out of all the courses we've done to date, we have only had 2 instances of bad behavior. One was injustice, and it was slight misunderstanding of what was meant. And one was in our recent scriptures course, where it was a man of the cloth, and he was speaking from his own religious point of view. And it got a little difficult. And what we did in that situation, because we don't talk directly to the learners. If we did, that's all we'd be doing. So what we did with that case, we were getting complaints. And what we ended up doing was reposting. When people take our course, they have to agree the honor code. I will not cheat. Well, you saw how that worked out. They have to agree to have the appropriate behavior in a discussion forum. So what we ended up doing was we posted that agreement in every discussion forum. And then in that particular case, we ended up writing correspondence back and forth and explained that these are the rules, and he had agreed to these rules. And he didn't really even know he was bothering people. So those are the situations we have. We don't know if it's self-selecting. We don't know if it's because the quality of the content in the conversation does not itself to it. But in the edX platform, the discussion forums, you could flag somebody if they're not. Let's say that edX is about 3.5, 4 years old, continues to evolve, and they'd be the first to admit their discussion forums are still a little bit rudimentary. So that's one of the things we're working with them on that. Now your question, I'm sorry, the question was also, do they have to come up with something? Typically, the professors will say, well, what's an example? What might I want to know? In the case of the planetary science, he was like, oh, it's okay. And you do what you want and just let me know. And at the end of every version, we write a basic course report. And so at the end of his course, he was so interested in what he learned. The second version, now he's consulting with some of the researchers, and now he's very interested in what he wanted to know about is differentiation in learning. So some people come with no knowledge, some people come with a lot of knowledge, all that in between. How can we create our course that can deliver on that differentiated learning? And so what we decided to do with this course is we're doing a pilot project with McGraw Hill with their adaptive technology. We're only going to do it in one part of the course. We're using their technology. The company will learn how their tool is working and a little bit about learners of different. So if they're not interested in research in version 1, sometimes they get more interested in version 2. But everything has a research component, at least. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 components. One research experiment we did, Todd Rogers from the Kennedy School of Harvard, he has this way in our course. He wanted to know, will people go further in a course? Remember, a lot of people aren't finishing. will they finish or go further in a course if we contact 2 or 3 of their friends and say, this week, they're going to learn about, nitrogen and science of cooking. You may want to ask your friend about that. And so clearly, anytime we do research, we go through the proper compliance at Harvard. We call it IRB. I don't know what it stands for, but it's when you do testing on human subjects. And in this particular case, we say, dear learners, anybody that wants, I think it's called support device, anybody that wants to be part of our test, please send us 2 to 3 names, their emails, their email addresses, and the only condition is you can't live with this person. Because can you imagine the person that you really are wanting to scream at, do the dishes, and they're saying, yeah, but what about osmosis? So the study became so interesting that most courses now will have that built in. We've at least done it with about 30 courses so far. So it all depends. Okay? Other questions on research? Yes.
I wanted to ask you what other tools do you have to make the courses more interactive, like the forums or the content you just mentioned?
So the question is, what other tools do we have to make our courses more interactive and more engaging? Sounds like what you're saying. To receive more feedback. Oh yes. A few things. We do an entry survey. We do an exit survey. And I should say up front, we're struggling with that. We're struggling with it because there's so many people. So MOOC is a massive online course. We also have what we call a small private online course. And those courses tend to have, we restrict enrollment for up to 500 people, for example. So we're trying different types of engagement depending on how many resources we can put into a particular course. So we've been looking at a tool that we developed, and it was open source and we involved it, called Daylight. So you're experience the course Justice, and it gives you provocations. Provocations is a question. Here's one. You do it down here sometimes, right? Depending on the season. So in Boston, when the snow hits, people will shovel their car out of the public street. And then they spend all that time shoveling the car out of a parking place they do not own, right? And then they put a chair or cones, and then that tells them nobody can park here because I did it. And there's a cultural, not legal, but cultural expectation that when you come home at night, your spot will be there. So the provocation is that fair? And then so we ask the question, is that fair? And the Daylight tool takes the top 100 answers and then adds another 50 or 100 randomized answers and say, well, a lot of people have said yes, and you have to say your answer and then write out why. And so the idea is, you're very, yes, of course, I spent all that time. And then you see other people's answers, and you're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so then you're able to change your answer. Those types of engagement ideas that don't take us humans, to go in there and actually facilitate. So that would be reacting to a provocation. Another example, if you want to have a vibrant discussion group, and this will probably be very obvious to you, is if you want to really steer the conversation so it stays on point, we do prompts. We do prompts, and we will feed into the discussion forum saying, well, the lecture yesterday in last week's course, and then we'll ask, again, a provocative question, because people love to give their opinion. And what would really be cool, but we haven't done it yet, we did it in public broadcasting, is do things that fail. So in public broadcasting, the whole NOVA series about how did ancient worlds, how did they move the Moai in Easter Island? How did they raise the obelisk in Egypt? oh, people were writing in with their answers, but the most vibrant conversations came from when we didn't know. If you really want to have a vibrant conversation, you know, show you don't know about or you're trying to figure out, and have the learners give feedback and make them more actively engaged. And those are just a few examples. So let's research. Now,
Ani,
yes. Hi. Oh, yes.
Yo voy a preguntar en español.
Hablo pero I knew I had this on for a reason.
Ani, los cursos en línea masivos, esto incluye a las personas discapacitadas. Es posible hacer un curso, un MOOC para personas sordas o para personas con discapacidad auditiva o visual.
They request más favor. Muchas gracias por eso. So, how do we show things to people who can't see? Now, I came here, the video that I downloaded on the edX platform, everything we do has captions. It has captions for hard of hearing, but also when you add captions or subtitles, it's very good for people with English as a second language. And so I apologize that I did not bring the captions for this. If you go to any of our courses online, everything we do has captions for people who are hard of hearing or who are deaf. But as is the case with any issue of what we would call making things accessible, there's always an unintended positive result. So if you can't hear, that helps you. It helps you hear the content. If you are on a street and you have that curb cut for people in wheelchairs, it's great for people that have strollers, right? People that are skateboarding. So we started looking at some of these technologies to make our content more accessible. It is such a high priority. Last November, hired a full-time accessibility manager. So our content goes through the accessibility, and he will check the content to see what works and what doesn't. He himself is blind. He's low vision. He can only see out of 1/3 of one eye. And he has, first he runs a script. There's computer software that will go through your HTML, your web content, and flag things that may not be accessible. Because if you are blind, you are using your keyboard to navigate, and it's called screen reader. So a screen reader will go through the content, it will speak to you. So this is working very well for us until we have content that is what we would call visual pedagogy. If you are looking at our annotation tool and you want to annotate, well, how do you know where on the screen? And how do you know when on the screen if it's a video? So we're working with technology that we actually invented in public broadcasting called descriptive video services. So just like you have a caption track, we will have, as we begin to figure out the workflow for this, we will have a descriptive video track, and that allows people who cannot see but can hear to explain what's going on the screen. It's very challenging in some of our courses. We have a course called, it's a course we did with MIT and University of Tokyo. It's a collaboration, and it's called Visualizing Japan. Looking at Japan, our part of the course was looking at Japan from the 50s when General Perry came and invaded Japan, all the way up until about 1930s. And so that was our biggest challenge so far for making people that have visual impairments understand what's going on the screen. Now we also have, with this new accessibility manager, We also have a process that we call accommodations. So if you have a learning disability, a learning challenge, let's say you have a fear of taking a test and you need more time. We have a process where people can put in a say, I have this learning challenge and I need more time. We get about two requests a month. So some people have said, but Annie, it hardly ever happens. And I said, that's because our content's not accessible enough for them to even try, right? So we can make, so once our content becomes more and more accessible, so we can make courses accessible, but if the platform is not accessible, they can't get to our content. So edX has created, they now have a team of 4 people working on accessibility issues. Very similar to what I think you would have in your classroom. If you have different challenges, would you agree that you make accommodations for them? Or you try, right? So we're trying to formalize that process. We have a long way to go, but those are some examples. We're also looking at technologies that can assist how, if you have motor challenges, we're looking at some technologies for that, but the learner has to have that. But at least in well-resourced countries, people with these challenges may already have that screen reader on their computer. Does that answer your question? ¿Comprendes? ¿Algo más?
Hablando de las personas sordas, en general los videos de los cursos en línea tienen mucho contenido descriptivo pero hablado y para estas personas es difícil tener comprender la gramática de todo lo que dice. Entonces, se piensa en algún momento en que adaptar los videos para que personas que no tienen gramática puedan comprender el contenido.
We are thinking about this. We find it very important. When I was in public television, one of the experiments, I was in charge of research and development. So my job was to try things we were not doing. So what we tried just in the lab experiments is, and we were doing television. So imagine a world that now is today, at least in some of the technologies in the States. If somebody that can't see, or even in the movies, we created a technology called talking movies. So it's a track where instead of getting the subtitles, you actually get the description that use natural pauses in a script. So the man walks into the room, he puts his coat on the chair. So we're looking at how could we do that in some of our courses. And some of the challenges that we're having, especially in the sciences, when we have a lot of the equations on the screen, it's very challenging. It's very challenging to coach faculty to not say, as you can see in the upper right corner. So we're just scratching the surface. It's very important, but it's difficult, but it's a challenge we're trying to meet. And if you have specific ideas on how to do it, we would love to hear. One thing that might be interesting for you to hear is, so on the edX platform, when they first started, they put out 4 versions: half speed, real speed, like just normal speed, 1.5 times speed, and 2 times speed. What do you think was the normal speed in which the biggest majority were using? They were using 1.5 times speed, because video takes a lot longer than just reading it, right? So about a third to half of came out of our research, actually. When we have, say, a 10-week course, halfway into the course, learners stop watching the video, but they're still passing the assessments, and you're thinking, what's going on there? And we still don't fully understand it. We're doing more research on it. We think they're downloading the transcript because we have everything has subtitles, but it has a downloadable transcript. It's much faster for many people to read than it is to watch the video. So those are some of the things we're doing to approach it And I'm the first to say we're a long ways away. It starts with a vision, and it starts with support from the top, very high up in the university. If you have other suggestions for it, I would love to. Okay. Thank you. So, a little bit more about research and then we'll move on. We think about it sometimes with small r research. How many people took my course? What can I learn from my course that I can use for version 2? So that's kind of small r. Useful, where you're putting the data to use. And big R is when we actually have professors working with their doctoral students to write full papers to be published. So we're constantly looking at when do we think we have something that is breaking new ground in the discipline, in the industry in which that discipline is taking place. So we do both. Both are big R, just as in your university, I'm sure. You have to be able to really demonstrate that your research is replicable, that your experimentation, you probably have your double-blind studies and such. This takes a lot of time and a lot of focus on a particular research project, just like doing any of your academic endeavors. But don't underestimate the small R research. I don't know if this is going to translate, but everywhere I go, big data, big data. So right now, there are literally 200,000 jobs openings in the United States alone because companies want to hire people that know how to take it and analyze it, to know how to make the next product, to know what's working. In fact, I'm so out of my depth here, but we are working on a course, a whole umbrella of courses on working with big data. And big data is sexy, right? Because you have Google, you have Facebook, we have data all over. But the problem is, when you have so much data, but not enough analytical skills, you can go through the data and prove pretty much anything you want. Depends on how you're asking the question, how the data is segmented and organized and structured. So here we have, let's solve this problem by using the big data. None of us have the slightest idea of what to do with. And we call that the big data hype. So we're trying to not be a hype in our data, we're trying to actually use it in a way. Here's an example of one of the big R research papers. These particular faculty, Dan and Carl, have been doing tests and experiences with mind laundering. So it was their research paper that actually started to inform some of our processes, and now we're working on with them to integrate research on mind laundering. When do we start losing learners' attention? So my consejo is integrate quantitative and qualitative research from the project beginning. Don't let research be an afterthought. Pre and post surveys are absolutely necessary. This brings us to some of our copyright issues. Now, we're part of Harvard, just like your university, you'll probably, as you start to develop your online platform and your online courses, you really want to work with your librarians. Who knows how to structure information and archive it better than your librarians? Don't reinvent the wheel. The reason it is so far up in the process is we've got museums, libraries, our legal department. We collaborate with those departments very early on in the process because if you want to use a manuscript or a scroll, a 100-foot scroll, get it out of the archive, the next time they open that scroll will be the last time. So before we can have access to it, it needs to be preserved, then conserved, then digitized, and then about 4 or 5 months later, we get to use it. So we want to plan for that early in the process. We want to plan for copyright early in the process because this we get all the time. I have all this content, Annie, and I know I can use it because I found it on the internet. Well, we all know how that goes. And so we need to, early on in the process, look at these issues before we spend 8 months working on something only to find that we can't use it. So here's an example. We've been working with our libraries, museums, and preservation, digitization, and archivists. So, talking about preservation and digitization, here's an example of a group that we've been working with for our project called The History of the Book. History Across Time and Space. And we're going way back in time for a lot of these. It's a 9-part course. So take a look at what they do.
I'm Deborah Mayer, Ellen Glazer, Conservator. The Weissman Center is a state-of-the-art facility with preservation and conservation specialists dedicated to the care and preservation of the rare and unique collections of the Harvard Libraries. I'm going to take you on a brief tour of the lab and show you some of the we have sort of general kinds of projects that we are involved with. So the first step studying a manuscript is knowing the materials that comprise the manuscript. And in this instance, we were particularly thinking of the pigments. And I've laid out a typical palette that you would find in medieval manuscripts. The gold that is applied here is gold leaf. So that's gold that has been pounded very, 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 very. Adhesive is put down and leaf is put down and burnished, and that's what gives it its high sheen.
In order to test, to locate where pieces may be loose or friable or being lost, you can either use a brush, or in some cases we actually like to use this very fine paper tip, which we soften gently between our fingers. And then again, working under a microscope, just using the very gentlest touch, we would be looking for movement of pigment, where a pigment piece would be lifting up or down.
And we employed several different techniques, all non-destructive, meaning whatever we did could not alter the manuscript in any way. As a conservation lab, we have sophisticated equipment, such as microscopes, fume extractors, and sinks plumbed with purified water. We have a staff of 25 people with a broad spectrum of disciplines and skills, including book, paper, and photographic conservation. We treat a variety of media and formats and rely on each other for sharing knowledge, skill, and insights.
That video was actually produced before I came on board, so I apologize for the focusing problem on my watch. To show the process. We have such a course right now on the history of prediction. Imagine. Question.
Is there an easy way to learn about copyright? I think that the answer is no, but some basic steps to learn about the copyright of any document. I don't know, any website to check. You said you told us about this rule that any document before 1920 is available. I don't know if you can access any website or some basic steps.
Let me, there's one of our copyright lawyers at Harvard has recently published a book. Let me see if I can get some information on that, and I'll try to bring it tomorrow. I think that the challenge of copyright is it's not only highly detailed, there are so many aspects, right, depending on the situation. And when you are in 4 walls that are physical walls, you could really use, it's educational fair use. You could really use pretty much anything you want. But once it goes out online for the world to have access to, that's when copyright gets very tricky. So let's see, we have a 14-page document that all our producers read. Unfortunately, I can't share it. I tried to share it with 2 universities. I get that question a lot. And it's one of those. It's one of those copyright documents. That's exactly right. And I think one of the reasons that those things are is there's always an issue of copyright always trying to mitigate risk, right? And so I think we don't put out our accessibility guidelines. We're trying to mitigate risk, but it doesn't make it easy for people that are just trying to learn this. So let me see if I can get it tomorrow. Great question. Yes. Un momento, por favor.
Simplemente como comentario, efectivamente cualquier tipo de elemento que se puede utilizar en un producto audiovisual se tiene que pagar. Sin embargo, hay un banco de imágenes como que son números libres que uno puede utilizar de manera académica. Si uno llega a utilizar una imagen o audio para un producto que pueda ser publicado, primero te llega una esa imagen o audio. Pasadas 24 horas entras en un plan más legal. Hay muchos bancos de imágenes y audio libres que van a utilizar.
No, you're absolutely right. And part of the 14-page document, there's a whole page that I might be able to share, actually. If it were up to me, I'd give everything away. So, for instance, Flickr. Flickr has an area that's the site where people share their photos. Flickr has a part of their site where people make their photos available for Creative Commons, CC BY. And Creative Commons, in short, says Creative Commons CC BY says you can use my photograph that I made, you can use my content that I made, as long as you credit me and you do not make money. But then, and that's what we use that often. But then there's CC NC, and NC stands for non-commercial. And then there's CCSA, share alike. It goes on and on and on. We use CCBY, and so we have 4 areas of copyright issues that we work with. Creative Commons, CC BY only. We make it ourselves. We get it. We use public domain. Or we get a jurisdiction from the lawyer that says this is transformative educational fair use. In the classroom, you have educational fair use. And then in about 2006, there became cases that brought to the forefront transformative educational fair use. And that's what I read earlier about you can't teach the topic in any other way. And it takes a lot longer for us to go through the process of getting that jurisdiction. But yes, there are a lot of sites where people allow you to use it. Now, we would never be able to use something that was only available for a certain amount of time because we wouldn't be able to track. We could have, some of our courses have 1,000, 1,200 lines, rows in a spreadsheet of jurisdiction on whether it's copyright appropriate for our use. I don't know how, it's a lawyer and he has 3 assistants and they still can't keep up. So I'm trying to tell my producers, my course developers, which is please stop making it so many images, and then they say, so you want me to do less good courses? Okay, I can't win. But it's a challenge. But it's a challenge that we've had situations where we were using, this was new for us, all of our content is served on YouTube. edX uses YouTube. So YouTube has these algorithms that crawls through the content constantly. And so it'll crawl through the content and say, I think this image you use somebody's content that you were not allowed to use. Algorithms are so sophisticated that you could have images that are similar and it could still flag it. What we didn't know is when it's a private channel, it's not publicly available, you can't publicly search it. Their algorithms even search the private channel. So we had a situation where we were using in the draft, only in the production, before it went through copyright, we were using a man's image, and then we didn't know that it crawled through the private site. So that man got a takedown notice because he was using a Harvard image. It wasn't a Harvard image, it was his image. The algorithms are saying, well, we got this guy that nobody knows, and we've got Harvard. He must take the image. We felt terrible. And then, so now, and we figured it all out, we took the image out. It hadn't even been made public. And so if we get what they call a DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, from I think it's in the 90s, that we don't even put those in just to go through the check. That's how cautious we are. That's just the way we do it at Harvard, but it's very, very tricky. And so you never know when somebody can see what you've made use of. We also had an example where the note came to me, it's a guy in Europe, said, you used my image illegally. I did 3 keystrokes. I went right into our asset tracker, and I saw, actually we didn't. He had put it on Flickr, and he had made it CCBY. And I wrote back saying, I'm terribly sorry, but on this date, at this web address, you made this CCBY. And he wrote back immediately saying, I'm so sorry, I forgot I did that. But we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have the asset tracker. But the really not so funny part was, but by the way, there are two assets, and you attributed one, we also, you saw at the end of our videos, there's attribution. That's because of our copyright, or copyright guidelines. And so even though we had the right to use this image, we had accidentally attributed it to somebody else. The images were right next to each other, and so we flipped them. So we have a copyright issue, we will fix it within 24 hours of noticing. It's just that important for us. Okay, now, you see on your rainbow charts that the orange line here, because we have to start early, the final one, remember the third phase of production is archiving. Because again, it's only an asset. If you know where to find it, you can rest to use it. So this line directly comes down to this line. We can't do proper archiving if we hadn't done the check to begin with. And I really have to say that some of this is aspirational. We're really, it's just like the question about accessibility. Even though all our videos are captioned, we have a long way to go on visual pedagogy. And just like this makes it seem like we have it all figured out. We're still working on our archive structure. It's hard. So let's see. This is probably, let me go into this a little bit. Tomorrow we're going to talk a lot more about the learning objectives and measuring outcomes. But let me just say this. When you get to this red line, the course design and pre-production, remember pre-production is all the planning. You're going to send a crew, you're going to send a video team. Yeah, sometimes we've gone as far as Rwanda and Haiti, Europe, but mostly it's in the greater Boston area or in the United States. It's expensive. So we want to make sure that when we get to that location, that we know we have the right to be there. We know we have the right certificate of insurance to go into a major museum or library. We're going to do a shoot in August at the Bodleian in Oxford, England. If we don't do proper pre-production, we could send a team there and say, why did somebody tell me I needed a certificate of insurance to go into this valuable environment? If you don't have enough time to do pre-production, you don't have enough time to do the course. So planning. And you'll notice it says paper only. You really want to, in fact, I'm going to have a consejo coming up. The more pre-production you do before you start pushing the pixels, before you go into digital. Analog planning on a location, went to the place, to her house, we did test shoots. If you don't do that type of preparation, you're not only going to waste your valuable resources, you're really going to waste the time of the faculty. We serve at the privilege of the faculty. We're faculty driven, we're not market driven. And so the most important part for us is our relationship with the faculty. And the best way to make best use of these very busy people's time is pre-production. So we'll go into that more tomorrow. But it's this vertical line that we still have never heard. You want to stop designing at some point so you can make this stuff, make your content. But for some reason, we keep getting more and more ideas and it keeps going and going and going towards launch. Try to get your whole down on paper. Not that you can't change this and amend it, but there's going to be opportunities all the time. So our history of prediction course, that was part of the dinner party. From the beginning of humankind, we've always been interested in our future. Am I going to have a safe journey? You know, we have content where in Asia, they were doing maybe bone burning to see when you burn the bones, the cracks of the it's like reading your palm, but the cracks of the bone, that's going to tell you something. Over in Europe at the same time, they're using goat entrails to see what's your journey going to be like. Reading the tea leaves. So we're going from the antiquities of prediction all the way to modern math. So if we had had more predictive sense when we had the economic downturn in 2008, when the whole market crashed, if we had better understanding of how math can help us through all that massive amounts of data, we probably could have avoided some of those things. So prediction is very, very important. How did I not see this coming? It's very important in weather. The list goes on and on. So the course we're doing is prediction from antiquities to modern math. And so you can imagine, they just keep designing and designing and designing. I'm like, give me my vertical red line, you guys. It's not happening, but you might want to do it yourself. So, listen to a production. It takes time and resources. Okay. So we'll stop here, but tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about back-end design, where you start with the learning goals and objectives. You know what you want to teach. Then how will you know if your students have actually grasped it? What kind of learning activities, what kind of interactive activities do you use to support those assessments and learning objectives? And only then do you start to apply media and technology. People come in all the time, myself included, with what we call the shiny object syndrome. Whereas I read in the New York Times on Monday in the technology section that virtual reality is the way to go. It's going to transform what we do in education. Try doing that with 10,000 of your closest friends. So you really need to be thoughtful about how to support. You don't want to start with your media and technology. You want to get these concepts first. And I really have to tell you that we're not doing this very often. We're having a real struggle with it because people come in and they see what we're making. And they say, well, I want to do that, and I want to do that, and I want to do that. Well, now we're trying to have people do their course plan. And we say, we know that you want to go do this location shoot, but can you tell me, please, where your course plan that fits? And if there's not an answer, we have to work towards it to make sure that we're not spending valuable time and resources. So, what students will be able to do by the end of your course lessons and assignments? How will you know if students understand? What will you and your students do to achieve your objectives? And what will you and your students do to get there. So I invite you all back tomorrow. Little cliffhanger there. Melissa, do you say cliffhanger? Yeah, what she said. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm very grateful. So you know what? Any other questions before we depart?
We have some time for a couple of questions.
Sure, please.
Okay. Spanish, English?
Spanish. I will try my rusty English, please.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for all of this. Well, I was thinking how long should a MOOC, a standard MOOC, should be? I think maybe 6 weeks for a standard to complete it, 8 weeks. Just for the deciding mothers, I don't know, maybe you can tell us something of your
It's such a great question. How long should the course be? To me, that's like, how long is a piece of string, right? You don't know how long the piece of string is until you realize what you're using the string for. But there are other elements to think about. People drop out of MOOCs. There's no barrier to entry. You just need to get an email address from Gmail, free. Go into HarvardX, make yourself an account. It takes about 5 minutes, probably less. And then you get in. You didn't have to have an application. If you drop out, nobody notices, right? So typically 3 to 4 weeks in, you start to see a precipitous drop off. But what's interesting, because we've done the research and we continue to do the research, no matter how long a course is, that throughput line, like a hockey stick, it always looks the same. It's just longer or shorter. So right 3 weeks in, they're like, see ya. So we're starting to think, well, should we put our best content first to say, hold on the 3rd week, this is the stuff's going to be good. I mean, do you have shopping for courses? Yeah? Okay. So how many times have you gone into that first week of course and the faculty are at their best and they're showing you some good stuff and like, I'm going to take this in the 3rd week. You're like, oh, kill me now. So, so we're looking at how do we entice people to stay for when it gets good, because courses often have that scaffolding, right? You have the introduction, you want to have people normalized to know the same content. But there are other elements to think about. If you want to blend your course, you're doing an online course and you think, I'm going to do it online, I'm going to learn from all of my great online learners because this is going to make my course on campus much better. And I'm going to have all this great content. Well, your semester is what, 12, 14 weeks? You can do a half course, it's still half of that. So what are your future plans with your course? What do you want to think about how long your course is, what your course uses? So there's no right or wrong answer, but I will say that we are starting to lean towards 4 to 6 weeks, but it's causing other problems. We have people Gordon, for example, the Queen Rania Foundation. They take our courses, they license them, they translate them into Arabic, and they use it with their local student population. They don't want 4-week courses, right? So some of the things I've been working with some of the faculty saying, you know what, for your version 1, let's just do part of your course. And maybe let's start in the middle. But so think about how much time they have, how much what's their commitment. You know, maybe they can spend less time with a shorter course. What people want to use it for, flipped, maybe licensing. A lot of our courses will go on to be in our Department of Continuing Education, where people go to pay a lot of money to get credit for the course. Well, they can't use a 4-week course. They can use an 8-week course as long as we have 2 8-week courses that can make a semester, or maybe it's 7 weeks each. So if you're going for the highest engagement and the highest retention, logic would say make it shorter. And if you're going for use in your classroom, maybe you want to focus on that which is traditionally difficult for students to understand. So, maybe they're having a difficult, that's one of the questions I ask in onboarding. Instead of asking those learning objectives, I say, what's the most traditionally difficult part of your course? And so I asked the Shakespearean faculty, and he said prosody. Well, I looked at my phone and looked at prosody, and I said, oh, prosody, that's a problem. But I think it's the cadence and rhythm in which something is read. And he said people are reading Shakespeare as a book, as opposed to theatric in the waves and flows, and I'm doing a horrible job in the portion. But every faculty will be able to tell you, unless it's a survey course, we're going to do 8 readings on 8 different topics to introduce you to the overall major of neuroscience. Those tend to not necessarily have those challenges yet. Courses that are going deep into a subject, there will be times when your students just can't get it. Mathematics, I just learned 3 weeks ago that traditionally difficult challenges for people, and it surprised me, was issues around exponential math. So, and I said, well, how do you teach it now? And then they'll tell me what works, what doesn't. I'll say, well, have you ever wanted like a piece of media or technology? And then they start going through the process, and then I'll say, they'll have that aha moment, oh my God, with this, I can actually show exponential thinking. Maybe it's coins, maybe it's fill in the blank. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve and how far you need to go. And it is nice if you can split it up, especially since we do 3 versions. They can add on to it. I hope that answers. Okay, sure.
My second question is, why we should do a MOOC? Why you do MOOCs, especially if they are free? Maybe it's a question that we have. I don't know. I think that maybe
Well, if you're asking me from Harvard's point of view, it goes back to our mission. Our mission, it's education, so you have to have the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, our 3 R's are reach. We want to reach people. We want to share the wealth of Harvard, make it accessible to the world, but not just for generosity. We want to research it, and we want to understand what we don't currently understand, whether it's a topic, whether it's a learning approach, but most importantly, we want the 3rd R, we've got reach and research, but then we have recirculation at campus, because we want our faculty to have an opportunity, to have hands-on opportunity to improve their teaching and learning. And all of this great content for which we can have reuse. So for us, it's our reach, our research, and our recirculation to campus. And imagine in the reach, imagine you're having that religious course and you're having people from all over the world. We still, unfortunately, at Harvard, it's still very homogenous, very the same. Well, I like it when we're going to the courses like justice, for example, in some of these scriptures courses. You've got East leading West, you've got different voices that I don't know about others, but I'm not finding that as much on our campus. So it's the diversity of voices, it's the conversation, it's the discourse that I think contributes to a more of an understanding. In fact, that's one of the reasons with China X. China X is from the beginning of history in China to modern China. We have had 3 or 4 business people talk to us. We have one we're talking to right now from China that says, well, we can create a consolidated version of China. Because the theory is, if you don't understand where China came from, it's very hard to understand where they are and how they be today. So the approaches that we've had for business people, in fact, some of them will become most likely major donors, because the idea of sharing that history with the world from their opinion, the latest request we had, but can you just stop at 1911? We want to do, yeah, true story. We want to do transfer, just stop at that 1911, which is the last. maybe we'll do a version like that. But the idea is that in their minds of these people that come to talk, if the world better understood us, maybe we could create better relations that come to fruition and things that we all work together. That's a nice way to end this talk, isn't it? All right.
Thank you very much, Annie. Bueno, mañana vamos a continuar, ya saben, 2:30 por favor, unos 5 minutitos antes para que podamos empezar a la hora. Y thank you very much, Annie.
Thank you all.
Ok, no se olviden por favor a los que tienen los audífonos,
Remember to keep your rainbow document because I don't know how many copies.
y